Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I am Kristian Roberts. I am back. I'm waiting on my fabulous friend and co-host, Quo Johnson. She should be joining us in a minute, but we'll get everybody a chance to log on and say hello and tell us where you're from and where you are right now. You might not necessarily be in the place that you're originally from. Um, but, as you know, we are in Dallas, Texas. I see a few people joining. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming on. Thank you so much. Since we last saw you, we joked last time a little bit about the weather here in Texas and how we don't do cold. And I will be happy to tell you that it is going to be 70 degrees today, apparently. But tomorrow is going to be a different thing. Okay, it's supposed to get really cold right after that. At least cold for Texans. I'm sorry again to the people in other parts um, of the world that are dealing with the worst temperatures, okay, than we are here. But understand that we make up for it with the brutal heat we have in the summer. Anyway, I've gone on a tangent, but welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm waiting on my fabulous friend and co-host, Quo Johnson. She will be here in a second. Looks like she's already in. I'm just waiting for her to basically knock at the door so I can let her in. I hope everyone is doing well, particularly of you, those of you who are in season right now and producing and performing. I also want to make it a point to make sure we acknowledge what is going on in other parts of the world. We know about the crisis in Ukraine. Thinking about everybody that's involved in that, and we have you in our thoughts, of course, and anybody else that's experiencing crises like this. We know it's not just limited to Ukraine at this time. So we are keeping you in our thoughts. Yes, you can ask me something. I didn't know what was happening, so there we go. Hey,
Thank
Quo.
you. Hi. I was trying to get in. It wouldn't let me. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, I just ended up hitting your name and inviting you in. I was like, these people are tired of hearing me babble. Um,
No, I appreciate the weather update, and then as well as the acknowledgement of what's happening in the world. Just like we say at the Dallas Opera, whenever we're doing any of our meetings, any of our company culture sessions, things do not just end just because we log in.
yep,
Things do not end just because we have a meeting. The impact of the day, the impact of our lives, and whatever happened this morning, whatever happened last night, whatever's going on with family, does not go away just because it's time to work. Right? We
correct.
bring our full selves to the work and hold space where we can, hold space as always, and acknowledge that, and then find ways to do things together to get the work done together. So thank you for that acknowledgement as well. I appreciate that.
Of course. We say things do not occur in a vacuum. So there you go. Folks, thank you for joining us today. I am Kristian Roberts. I'm here with my fabulous friend and co-host,
Quodicia Johnson.
and we are back with another live episode of Taking the Stage with Kristian.
And Quo. We begin every single episode with a land and people acknowledgement. I want to call on the name of Amber Sims, a beautiful, amazing, wonderful activist here in Dallas, who kind of brought forth the idea of adding people and acknowledging people to acknowledging the land and the people. So we do want to take this time, as always, to acknowledge that we in Dallas are on stolen land. We are on the land of the Caddo, the Wichita, and the Comanche sovereign nations. Nations of beautiful, amazing, wonderful human beings who lived the full human experience because they were human beings. They loved, they fought, they lost, they cultivated the land since time immemorial. They lived with the land. They lived on this land. They took care of this land. They were also forced off the land by policy, that allowed for any means necessary. It literally says that in Dallas policy. And they face genocide. They face horrible and inhumane conditions. I also want to take the time to acknowledge that people were stolen from their homes and brought here to what we now enjoy as Dallas and forced into free and enslaved labor. From that free and enslaved labor, again, we enjoy what is Dallas. I do this not to place blame. People are to blame. None of us who are alive created these conditions. We're not to blame. We inherited these conditions. But with that inheritance comes the opportunity to acknowledge and uplift the communities who are here, who are thriving, to heal the harm, to speak truth, and to create a better world going forward. So I thank you for joining us, for joining the Dallas Opera for our land and people acknowledgement.
And we thank you, of course, for joining us today. Someone in the comments asked about auditions. Go to the Dallas Opera website, and you can find all of that information. Alex, if you're on, can you drop a link into the employment opportunities? That's where all of that would be housed. So I cannot personally speak for that, but that's the best direction I can give you on that. So let's jump in. Yeah, we love that. We love to have you. You know, like I said. But Alex can back us up and help us with that. So folks, today we just want to talk a little bit about it's something that's come up, you know, sort of over and over again in this particular work. I know Quo does this for a living, but but so she's heard it more than I have. But it comes with we have protocol for doing things, right? In business, people have protocol, they have handbooks, they have rules, and all of this kind of stuff. And we titled this episode today, Quo titled the episode, The Equity Code. And that is because people think that we're supposed to have a code. And it's very difficult to have a set of rules for this kind of work that's going to work for every organization, every individual, every country, every state, this sort of thing. And the reason why is there has to be a certain amount of flexibility and adaptability, meaning while there are, well, let me just put it this way. Pirates of the Caribbean, and when they said it's not so much rules but guidelines, okay? This is sort of what we're heading with here. And the part of the crux of this conversation, and I'm going to let Quo elaborate on it more because this is her ministry, if you will. But that's what I call it, okay? But one of the things that people ask, they go, well, where are the rules? Where are the guidelines? How do we implement this at our organizations? And I understand that. And I completely get that. But one of the things that happens with the guidelines, equity guidelines, EDI guidelines, company culture guidelines, racial healing guidelines, is that they have to be adapted for where you are. Meaning, what is your city? What is your community? What is your internal community at your organization? What is the individual work that you have to put in to be able to commit to the organizational mission of striving to create equity in every facet of the organization? So I'm going to let Quo talk about this a little bit. But one of the things that she said, you know, it requires a deep commitment for change. You cannot copy and paste it. So I will let her elaborate on that just a little bit, but I just wanted to give you a little insight as to where this conversation came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Kristian. In equity work or in this type of work, we hear often, equity specialists, we often hear, well, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? Right? Which is a very valid question. As we create a new world, there are questions. What am I supposed to do? What do I do? Sometimes, many times, what you need to do has already been provided. What people are actually looking for is a manual. People are looking for a list of exact steps to take. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Step 4, do this. Check this. You have now completed your equity work. You are certified. There you go. Congratulations. You will not receive that in this equity work. It is actually detrimental to search for a manual. Not to search for, it is detrimental to expect. It's okay to search. As you search, come to the realization, you will not get a manual for this work, for this equity work. There are things that we can all make sure we pay attention to and that we follow. But as organizations and as leaders and as individuals committed to this work, it requires that we use the tools that are already set in place so that we can create a new world. And when I say tools that are set in place, that does not mean our same company structures that we have. That does not mean the ways that we do business regularly. That does not mean that we continue going as our organizations have always done in the past. It requires that we use those emotional critical thinking skills and the emotional critical thinking tools necessary for this work. We have to acknowledge that white supremacy culture, the culture, this is not people and individuals, the culture that says that whiteness is the default, is to be prioritized, whiteness is normal, whiteness is better, these types of things, we have to acknowledge that that robs people of emotional critical thinking skills. This is why it is okay to logically know that A and B and C, this is how it should go. Yes and no, this is wrong. And logically understand that, but not be able to apply it when it comes to our communities, not be able to apply it when it comes to our staff, not be able to apply it when it comes to making changes. It's the same thing in place that says you should be objective, right? You should not be emotional, but then get emotional and shut down an entire equity session because you're uncomfortable. So, and not see the logic in the two, right? And not see the emotional critical thinking skills of you said don't be emotional. You're emotional. You're trying to shut down this session because you're emotional. Which one, right? And as opposed to which one acknowledging it's okay to have emotion in the workplace, right? So as we look at these things, that is not a way for us to create an exact tool as much as for us to follow certain guidelines or codes or things that we can look toward as an organization, things we can look toward as an industry. A lot of times people also want case studies. I purposely did not present case studies in the Racial Justice Opera Forum because case studies are sometimes and oftentimes used to copy and paste. Well, they did this over here at this organization. They did this over here at this organization. I'm going to do that here as well. Case studies give us the opportunity to feel competent, right? Mm-hmm. And to feel competent is important. We don't want to walk around feeling incompetent. But in this equity work, code number 1, right, as we look at this first part in this equity work, as opposed to a manual, acknowledge that equity is necessary. Mm. If equity is necessary, that means that there are inequitable things going on in your organization. So when you approach equity, it's a matter of saying, what do we need to correct? Not what do we need to shore up? What do we need to kind of fold in? What things in our organization, what things are happening in our communities, what things are happening in our practices that are inequitable, that are unfair? Because believe me, they exist. That's why we need equity. And it's okay, right? Embrace it. If you know that things need to change, let it change, right? Mm-hmm. Don't combat it or pretend as though it is not necessary. You have equity specialists for a reason. Those who have hired officers, DEI officers, equity officers, those who have hired those individuals, they're there for a reason. Mm-hmm. So it is okay to go ahead and acknowledge that these things are necessary. When we acknowledge that equity is necessary, that means we have to acknowledge that people are being disproportionately impacted in negative ways. That means we center those voices. We have to center the voices of those who are most impacted by this work. Otherwise, we have no way to measure whether or not things are changing. It's not up to those who have greater privilege in different areas, in different conditions. And when I say privilege, I mean comfort, or I mean opportunity. I mean, you don't have to worry about certain things. It's not up to those who have greater privilege to determine whether or not things are becoming equitable. Mm-hmm. We have to measure service by those who are being served. So that means a lot of cases, leaders of organizations, it is not up to you to measure. Point blank and period. It is not up to you to measure. It is up to you to learn, not because you have perhaps directly created conditions, but because you are running an organization within those conditions. So you have to learn what those conditions are and how they're inequitable in order for them to change, right? As opposed to an exact manual, step 1, step 2, step 3, start to acknowledge that equity is necessary. which means that things are not fair somewhere in the organization. There is harm being caused in the organization that can be prevented. There is healing that is necessary in the organization. Acknowledge it and then start to prioritize, not to target, not to tokenize, not to create as the end all be all, but start to prioritize the needs of those who are most disproportionately impacted in negative ways. That's two, right? One, two. As we look at three, use the tools that you have available. And when I say the tools that you have available, not this is how we're supposed to run meetings. I mean those emotional, critical thinking tools. Understand what white supremacy culture characteristics are. Understand how they impact every single person, how we're all taught these things. Understand how that leads to greater inequities. That is a tool. You cannot come to me and say, I don't need that. I am ready. What is the next thing? Because that is dead fire sure assuredness that you're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't know those things and come to me and say that, right? You can't know those things and then go to your equity specialist and say those things. Once you kind of dig deep into what those culture characteristics are, truly, Tima Okun and that team that identified those, once you truly dig deep into those, that starts to open up more avenues for you to be able to acknowledge, to accept, to engage, and to change inequitable conditions. So read the tools that you have, learn the new tools that you have, embody those tools. You have to sit with this. This is not something that only happens at work. What a privilege to only have to deal with this at work,
Come
right?
on now. Come on.
What a privilege to only have to think of diversity or to think of representation when it is time. What a privilege to compartmentalize. That privilege is causing more harm to more people. We gonna need you to have the same commitment just like everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
or as close of a commitment like everybody else who has no choice but to think about it, because if they don't, they will not be represented. And then when they are represented, they will not be represented in humane ways.
Mm-hmm.
So do not compartmentalize, live this. And if that is challenging for you, lean into that emotional critical thinking skills, because imagine all of the things you consider for your job, for your career, for your life. Those of us who are most disproportionately impacted by inequities are considering the same things with this additional weight,
Yep.
with this additional tool. For those of us who are considering that additional weight and that additional tool, and those of us who have to carry those, start to put that down and start to hand that off to people. Start to set your boundaries. Start to hand those things off to people who can use some stretching of emotion, who can use some stretching of imagination and creativity, right? Don't carry that on all by yourself. Start to hand that off to people. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to hand it back over to Kristian. That's four. Those are
Well,
four things.
well, and here's the thing on all of this. I go back to this every single time. We are a creative industry. And if we are not listening to multiple voices, all right, and giving true agency, particularly in this kind of work, what are we missing?
Mm-hmm.
What are we missing in terms of programming? What are we missing in terms of skill set on our staffs, on our stages, in our pits, on our with our crew? What are we missing? Okay, so that's the reason why when I know and I know that we have been harping on this. I know that people are like, folks, we got operas to produce, we have concerts to produce and all this. And I am not saying that this takes away from that. What it will do though is enhance that work if it's done right. And so when you ask for a manual, again, this is not something where you're like, let's get some KPIs for this. I caution that. I caution against that, because what it inevitably ends up doing is you start checking boxes rather than doing what we call the heart work, where you dig into
Mm-hmm.
the heart of an individual, a heart of an organization, a heart of a society, right?
Your own parts,
Your
right?
own
Your
heart.
own.
And so
Yeah.
this is what I'm saying. And again, I say this again, and I said this in the chat at the Racial Justice Opera Network, the forum, that it is that the lack of equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging, access, it is detrimental in a creative industry. Okay, when people cannot bring the whole of themselves to a place, or disproportionately affected, but yet they're expected to produce just as well as anybody else. It's very
Yeah.
difficult when you're trying to be creative, and you walk through a door and you're simply just trying to survive the blue and red lights that were flashing behind you, and you come in shook, right? Understand that it affects other people differently. That's all I'm saying. And the other thing is, again, we are a creative industry, y'all. We are a creative industry. So our minds must be clear and our hearts must be open to produce things that are relevant to our communities and that reflect what is going on in our communities, both internally and externally. So this is why this is vitally important. And it's why we won't stop talking about this, because we know that it works and that it can work. All right. When people are free to be open, and they are not carrying as much of the burden with them, that in a creative industry, man, that opens up a world of possibility with what we're able to do with this art form. So that's when people ask me, well, what does this have to do with opera? What does this have to do with producing the work? I say to them, we are in a country that is made up of people from every single walk of life. How are we equitably approaching those different types of individuals to be a part of our organization, truly a part of our organization, with agency and the creativity and the nuances that come through different culture and storytelling? We have got to, as an industry, to be open to those things. It will only serve to better what we do. I'm going to step down off of my Apple box now. Okay. I preached the sermon, but
Right.
I will hand it back over to Quo. But just understand what we're saying here. We're not asking anybody to change overnight. Okay, there have been a
Right.
lot of stuff been going on, but don't use the excuse of not changing overnight and so quickly to not do anything at all.
Yeah. Or misinterpret a quick desire to not feel guilty. So we're going to do and say something as a solution, because
Yeah,
it's not. And that's some of the most difficult things that we have to do and catch ourselves as human beings in this society. We feel really compelled to do something. I'm going to do something. I'm going to say something. I'm going to put up this statement. I'm going to, et cetera, et cetera. It goes so much beyond that. Truly sit and ask yourself, am I doing this work because I feel bad and I want to make myself feel better? Because there's a difference between intentions and impact. And if the intent is to make yourself feel better by helping others, right? We want to be mindful that the impact is harmful. Because if we do not see ourselves, everybody, as a part of this work, we see ourselves as separate and we're going to help somebody else. Let me assist you. Let me dote upon you, some assistance, some service, those types of things. Then we miss the ways in which we are also contributing to the harm. We miss the ways in which we miss the ways as in which I quote, if I do not see how my desire to help someone as opposed to be a part of this work too, if I do not see how that separates me unrealistically from the solution, then I create more harm. So we want to be mindful of why we're approaching this work. And Kristian, you talk about, you don't have to change overnight. A lot of people will say, okay, I know I need to talk to people. I know I need to censor those who are most impacted, but how do I do it?
hmm
How do I go and talk to people? One of the things that that comes with separation, and comes with inequity, is that our communities are separated. And when I say communities, at any part of identity, right, we don't actually engage with one another. If someone of a different identity, different experience, we don't often engage, and we don't engage in a way where people can bring their full selves. So there's always this limiting and this diminishing of identity and humanity. And then we just assume that that's how things are supposed to go. It requires that you be so honest that it is uncomfortable,
yeah,
and not honest about this is what I think, this is what I feel, as much that the things you're willing to share. You have to be honest about those things you normally don't say.
yes,
For my people who are mostly disproportionately impacted about this, you have to be honest about when conditions are unfair. And it's hard. I know it's hard. I'm not calling for everybody to do it just overnight, but you have to be honest about the boundaries that you need. A lot of times we are overworked. This is Women's History Month, right? I'm going to talk about Black women in particular right here. A lot of times we are given so many tasks that we're expected to do. And a lot of times we do it and we excel at it. But what happens in a society that thinks that more is better or bigger is better, we do it and we do it so well. And they say, thank you, good job. If they say that, and then they say, well, do this too.
Yep.
You did that so well. You struggled, you suffered, you cried, you probably didn't sleep, all these things. You did that so well. Do this too. Do this too. Good job. Do this too. Good job. Let's do more. We have to be honest about boundaries. We have to be honest about the ways we invite people into conversation to consider themselves and to consider how much how much is being asked of us. Mm-hmm. Those who are doing the asking, you have to be honest about why you're asking this much of someone. You have to be honest about the ways and the opportunities that you have that are different from others. And then you have to be honest about how you have been silent about the oppression of others. Yep. Because you have. We know it. You only have to look at me and say, we know it. That's how this happened. That's the honesty that we need. And in that, we need grace and we need humility as a community so that we start to shape more equitable conditions. But again, in order to do that, you have to acknowledge that things are not fair, which means that something has to change. Something's going to change and it is okay. A lot of times we've inherited these things. What are we doing to perpetuate them? What are we doing to disrupt and change them? You have to center the voices of those who are most impacted by this work and not target, not to use as an excuse, oh, I got them what they needed, I'm done, but to actually center the voices. There's so many. It is ongoing work. So there is not a we did that check. It's we did it. What's the next level, right? The next level of maintaining it, the next level of nurturing it. And as we look at centering those voices, we also have to be honest about what we need to do individually and how we have to commit, how our organizations have to commit to the work. And then we have to be honest about the fact that we are co-creating worlds. We're creating something we have yet to see, which means we don't have all the answers.
And we don't have a manual.
Don't have a manual.
We're writing it in time.
Tell me what to do. Show me the case study that says, I know. As we look at this work together, we're creating a world we have yet to see, which means that we have the ability to do so. But just like any live performance, if I go out there and tell you, you have to do A, B, and C, and something happens on stage, but you're still trying to do A, B, and C, and you lack the flexibility, you lack the creativity to find another way to get it done, it just robs you and everybody else of an experience.
It's what I call the vase problem on stage, right? We're on stage, you're singing, and you're blocking, you're staging. You practice it over and over again. But a vase falls over and rolls onto the floor. Do you just stand there and let the vase roll into the pit? Or do you keep singing and in a very slick manner, like it was supposed to happen, pick it up and put it back on the table? Just about every singer I know has had a vase moment of some kind where that has happened. All right. And they had to make a choice. That is the same flexibility that we have on stage is the same flexibility that can be applied to doing this kind of work. That's the reason why I said, I know we can do it. It's just a matter of how we prioritize doing it. Mm-hmm. So, not to put, and the thing is, again, this has to be done from our rehearsal rooms to our boardrooms, right? It has to be done. And I think, again, we will be better for it. And I go back to the fact, y'all, we are a creative industry, so we must do it. We must do it. We do. That's just all there is to it. So we won't continue to babble before you long today. We said we were going to wrap early because we have other things to do. Well, Quo has to do some pinch hitting on my behalf, but I want to turn it over to her for positive notes, because in the end, I think the results of continuing this work will be positive.
Mm-hmm. Positive notes. There is a lot of work to do. And Kristian, we often discuss that there's so much work to do. Mm-hmm. We have a long way to go. But the beautiful thing about that is, in order for you to be aware of the difficulty, it means that you have the skill to develop and meet that challenge. I look at when I first learned to play piano, I was like, oh, that's great. I want to play that. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. With no idea of how difficult and how many hours and the skill and the technique it takes. I get it now.
Mm-hmm.
I get it now because I know more now. Take that same approach. I get it now and I'm getting there because I'm putting in the work to get it done. So take the same approach that this is a lot of work and there's a lot of things to do. No, we don't have an exact manual because that's lazy, to be honest, and that only benefits those who are already benefiting from a system that's unfair anyway. So no, there's no manual. Yes, you are going to have to figure this out with community. Yes, there are things that you can make sure you're doing. Yes, you're going to feel very uncomfortable. Yes, you're going to get upset because you realize that things have been a lie for a long time. But there is such beauty and liberation and truth that we have the opportunity to create something better together. So I encourage all of us in these positive notes to put down those things that are not serving you, that are
Mm-hmm.
not serving the person next to you. Put down the things that's not serving the industry. Put down the things that's not serving the organization. Put it down. Don't pick it back up. Put it down.
Lay aside the weight. Lay
Lay it.
aside the weight.
It is okay. Then we have a beautiful opportunity to free up our hands, to free up our minds and our hearts to create something even more better, right? More better, even greater. We have something, we have the opportunity to create something together, and something that is more meaningful and something that is rich and something that is a multitude of works, just like opera. So those are my positive notes.
Thank you so much, Quo. Thank you all for joining us. Please understand that we have to do this together, y'all. And as I say all the time, be bold, be creative, be open. I did an interview with Latanya Moore, and she said the biggest thing she said from the stage is be open. And that is what's going to have to happen. So thank you all for tuning in. Please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Peace.